Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Guiding Light podcast. Today, I'm here as ever with Ben over here. Nice to see you again, my friend.
Nice to see you, Chris.
And also, Emma has come to join us today, and I've known Emma for, I don't know, maybe about a year or so, something like that. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's absolutely wonderful, actually. It really, really is, because first time we met in person, isn't it?
Yeah, we've seen each other lots virtually, but never actually in person.
Yeah, which is the way it was in 2020 and 2021, but not in 2024.
No,
so this is what we should be doing now, isn't it, I think. So thank you for making the journey down into London today. And hey, let's open up with what we're here for, and that is to let you share about some of your lived experience. Yeah. So without further ado, over to you, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that we're actually recording this because it's actually Eating Disorder Awareness Week this week. So I've been doing a lot around it. And obviously my main lived experience is that I battled anorexia nervosa for over close to 10 years. I've been recovered now for 10 years. That makes me feel really old, but I've been recovered for 10 years now. So yeah, mine stemmed from, so I had something called anorexia nervosa. It started when I was quite young back then, so I was about 10. So a lot of mine came from bullying. So it stemmed from primary school really. So I'm quite a quirky person anyway. And in primary school, if you don't quite fit in, if you're quite out there, sometimes children aren't very nice to you. And for me, I was kind of waiting to, I guess my mum used to call it puppy fat, about to shoot up, go through puberty, and girls used to call me fat, ugly. Some of the words they used to call me was horrific. And that started in about year 4. So how old would that be? About 8, 9? So it started then, and kind of it continued from year 5, year 6. And I thought, leaving primary school, going to secondary school is a fresh start. You know, I'm going to be able to get away from the bullies. But unfortunately, I was from Colchester, so the school that I went to, a lot of it was like a mainstream school, so everyone moved on. And it continued, the bullying, and the only thing that I felt at the time that I could control was kind of what I put in my body. It's kind of like, it started as a bit of a health kick. I started to be like a vegetarian. I've always been quite a sporty person, and but the bullying continued. And when I lost all the weight, I then got called lanky. I couldn't win, ugly, and it continued from year 7, year 8, and kind of it spiraled. So I remember going to Cyprus. I went on holiday with my parents, and I couldn't even enjoy being a normal child. Like, I was swimming up and down that swimming pool. I had to have that addiction. I had to do 50 lengths every day, morning and night. And I ended up, that was in the summer holidays, and then by Christmas, so it was 2 weeks before Christmas, I ended up in hospital. So I ended up at a place called the Phoenix Centre, which is in Cambridgeshire. So from Colchester to Cambridgeshire, it's quite a long way to go. And my parents got told if I wasn't in hospital that week, they'd be planning my funeral the next. So yeah, I was under 4 stone when I first got hospitalised. And I never fitted into the programmes. I've always been a bit... I'm not difficult, that's the wrong word, but I wouldn't play ball. I wouldn't follow the programmes, and I was in there for 8 months, so I was away from home for 8 months. I used to call it a bit of like a refeeding clinic, because you weight restore, and then you get to go home. So once you're physically healthy, they let you go home. I went home, but unfortunately I went back into school. So guess what? When I went back into school, the bullying started again, and kind of I was like, it's out of control again. So again, my behaviours started to come back in, and within 6 months I was back into another hospital, and then I was there for 9 months, and this was my cycle of my life for over 6 years. So I got told back then. They said to my parents, she's a revolving door. She'll probably never have a healthy relationship with food or exercise. Kind of, this is going to be your daughter's life. And it did. It was about 8 years of my life, and it got to when I was about 18. And I was like, do I really want this to continuously be this cycle of my life? And you're in child services, and you hear a lot of horror stories when you're in children's hospitals about what's going to happen. Like adult services are scary. So it was kind of, Emma, you need to kind of get over it, or you're going to go into adult services. And I kind of decided that actually I was going to prove them wrong, because I'm one of these people that I do stick my heels in sometimes and have to prove people wrong. And finally, when I was 20, I managed to aid recovery. Would I say I wouldn't say I've fully recovered. I've still got things I've always said to you guys about, like body dysmorphia, body image. Would I say that I love my body? No. Would I say that I don't think I'd ever love my body. I say I accept my body the way it is, and I've been recovered now for over 10 years. And yeah, it's kind of shaped me into the woman I am today.
Brill. And that is a special woman. I know that from getting to know you, and it's so amazing that you've come here to share that. Really important. Some things that I picked up there, which I think I'd love to kind of jump in quickly before Ben jumps in with some stuff, because I know he can really relate. Control. You mentioned about doing this because it was the one thing you could control when other things were going on. So I'd love it if you could just jump into that a little bit more, maybe. And the other thing was the kind of messaging from the clinical staff.
Yeah.
Wow, like your daughter's going to be in this forever. That is not the kind of messaging. And also the kind of trying to scare kids into, it's bad now, but it'll be worse when you're in adult services. Also not good. So I think maybe talk about the control, and then maybe we could talk about the other bit as well, and if it's changing at all, if you've seen it changing.
Yeah, so the control side is quite I think when you're at that age, like I was 10 going on to 12, there's not a lot of things you have control in your life, let's be honest. My parents, they didn't control me, but obviously there's certain things you can't do at that age. Whereas actually, was my parents going to literally pin me on the floor and force me what I'm having? If I didn't want to have certain foods, they weren't going to make me. And that's why I felt, it's a weird way of explaining it. You feel like your life's out of control. So you feel very out of control, even though you think you're in control in your eating disorder. You think, actually, me not eating that or not eating hardly anything, I'm in control. In the grand scheme of things, I was very much out of control of my life. But that, for me, I always explain it as a battery. My body was a battery. And back then, like, it used to be like this, my whole body was Emma. But as I got from 10 till I was about 12, this battery of Emma started to drain away, and like my eating disorder started to tick up. And I always explain it as there was a voice in my head. I knew it was me, but it was that very negative side to me, that eating disorder. And every time I picked up something that I wanted to eat, or if I didn't want to do 50 lengths in a swim pool, that voice would scream at me. And I felt that voice in my head was actually, it was controlling me, but I felt like that was the thing that was making me happy, because people were starting to comment on, oh, you're looking well, you're losing the weight. And I thought, oh, the voice is helping me to get what I want. And I felt that made me in control. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think I identify, I was told as well during my eating disorder that I'll never have a relationship with food that's healthy. Ever. So I accepted that. And I also controlled it. So what I used to be different, I suffer with bulimia, right? So, we've had lots of conversations on it and we met, but it's exactly the same. Even though you restricted and I overeat. But what I used to do was, I didn't want my parents knowing. So what I'd do is I used to eat, and then my control was to throw it back up, to purge. And basically I was starving myself because I weren't eating anything. But it was my control. I felt I was in control of when I done that. And I know that speaking to you, you had a similar thing where you're in control when you eat. That's like, I can control when I eat. Like, it's that I'm taking control of my life. I think mine stems from, I got such a busy head. That was the one element that I could control. Probably the only thing in my life that I could actually control at that point. So I can really relate. I get it. I really do.
It was like a power thing. It felt like I felt quite powerful if I was like, I'd sit at the dinner table with friends, and if I was sitting there not eating or not thinking, I felt like, oh, I'm in such control. Look at me, I'm not eating that, and they're all eating all that thing. But also things like, at that age, you're going to school. Your parents are not always there. Teachers are not can't watch you because the school that I was at, there was over 1,000 children. Like, they can't watch you onto one-to-one. So my mum would give me a packed lunch because we couldn't afford for me to keep getting meals at school. And mum would pack it up and I would put it in the bin and put the wrappers back in, and she'd be like, oh, I made her lunch. And that felt like out of control because I kept my mum happy because she thought I was putting what she was packing me up, but I wasn't. And that felt a control because I felt like the bullies especially, I felt I was so out of control with the work that I couldn't control what they were saying to me, the things they used to do to me at school and awful things. And the biggest thing I controlled was what that voice was saying in my head, and that's how I felt I was in control. But looking back, I can see now I was far from being in control. I was madly uncontrolled. I was in such uncontrollable state, but that was the one way. And also it kept the voice at bay. Some days it's so mentally exhausting, that voice in my head screaming at me, saying, don't have that. If you eat that, you're going to get fat. If you eat that, something bad's going to happen to your mum. And sometimes I did it because I just didn't have the energy anymore to fight back at that voice in my head.
Yeah.
Did you experience highs? So, like, I got what I can see when I was being sick and I'd get to that dizzy period of thing, I got euphoric highs. And that was the addictive part to me, how far I could go before I passed out.
And I think that was one that the hunger, I think I became immune to the hunger, but it was the way doctors and people said, you shouldn't be able to stand, what you're consuming, you should not be standing here and still exercising. And I thought, well, I am, so I'm really powerful. And you do get like a high from it because you're thinking, actually, I thought I was almost like people. It was really sad to think, but my mum and dad, that's the only time I've ever seen my dad cry, was the doctor saying, Emma's gonna die. And my dad would look at me and say, Emma, you need to eat, you're gonna die. And I just looked at him and laughed. And I said, I'm not gonna die. And I felt almost like I was immune to death. Like I thought, I'm so strong and powerful, I'm in such control of this, nothing's bad's gonna happen. And I literally looked at my dad and mum, and they'd say, you're not gonna be here, and I just laugh at them. And they said it was almost like, they said they knew when they were talking to Emma, when they were talking to the eating disorder, because it was completely different looks. And it was like the eating disorder, when I like laughing at them, when they said, you're going to die, they said it was almost like demonic, like there was nothing there. The lights were on. They used to say the lights were on, but no one was home. Emma wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. I'm getting shivers because it's like seeing myself, it's a mental illness, and I suffer with a range of mental illness, but for that one in particular was so secretive to me. Like, no one knew until I was in hospital. Like, and I was desperate, and people were saying to me, your body is going to close down, Ben. Like, you are in trouble, I've recently had a relapse, my second one in a year, but, I thought it was good if you could share a bit about, you talk about your body, and that's why I had a relapse. So I'm really intrigued into maybe getting a bit more of an insight into that.
Yeah, I always think my body dysmorphia, my body image, when people say, oh, you can, recover, I always say it's the back of my head. Like, I never say that it could come back, because, you can relapse. It is one of those things. But my body dysmorphia especially, I think that's the hardest thing since coming out. Like, I eat well, I do well, but my body dysmorphia I find really hard. And now I found it even harder, which is I do a lot of I sometimes write blogs, because it kind of helps me process what's going on in my head. Because so now, being pregnant, 26 weeks pregnant, my body dysmorphia has gone through the roof. Okay, so I find it really hard with the changes to my body. And I always think that my body dysmorphia, like, people were like, but you don't, they explain it to you and you just think, I used to, like, my husband will say it to me and I'll be like, well, you got to say that, you love me, you're with me. My mum will say it, she's got to say that, she's my mum, but you don't believe him. And I sometimes always explain that body dysmorphia for me is like looking in a mirror. So I look in a mirror and it's a really distorted vision of what I see. So when I look at it, I don't see what everyone else sees. And literally it feels like, it sounds really dark, but it's like people, like, if it was in the mirror, people circling, they'd be circling different body parts, fat, ugly. That's what I see when I look in the mirror a lot of the time. And I have bad days, I feel my mindset's in a more positive place. I don't act on it, but I do still think sometimes I have quite a negative relationship with food on certain days. Like certain days I'll let my body dysmorphia get on top of me. I won't start cutting things out, but what Tom says to me, my husband, is that I sound like a bit of a track record. So I'll have to, it's like a reassurance thing. So I have to he says I keep repeating myself and think, do you think I'm fat? This food's bad for me. Do you think that's going to make me this? And Tom's like, it's like he has to keep saying, no, Emma, you're fine. And this. And he's like, it's literally like a loop. And I said, I have to have that reassurance because what's going on in my head. And I don't know if I'll ever get over with my body dysmorphia. I think it's maybe something that maybe I'll accept it, but I need to learn to live with it. I don't know if I'll ever get over it.
That's really important, you saying those things out loud as well, isn't it? Because if you're not saying those things out loud, they're in your head. And it's just so
it eats
important.
away at you, yeah.
Yeah, big time. I'm finding this fascinating. So for me, and I didn't realise this, but, I've binge eaten a lot in my life. And that's because of like my ADHD, I recognise now. But I didn't even realise I was doing all this stuff. But certainly when I came into recovery from alcohol and gambling, I put on a lot of weight, and I thought I'd lose weight because I was, not drinking anymore. But it's because I was moving to food. When I felt uneasy, I was moving to food, and I've done that a lot. And also, then there's that dopamine thing again, where it's like I'm trying to find something that made me feel good. So that's kind of where I went, but I didn't recognise any of that stuff. And it's very interesting. I kind of liken some of the things you said there. You said about the voice in your head talking about, oh, that's going to make you fat. But you then also said, oh, if you eat that, your mum's going to die. And I think that's really interesting because I don't think a lot of people recognise that that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And once again, like, that's the mental health side of this. People will probably just think this is an image thing or whatever, and it isn't. There is so much more to it. Back to that control bit. And I don't know anywhere near as much as you two. This is incredible. But
you get a lot. The one thing that you get, what you're saying is, I don't know if you ever got it, was she's an attention seeker. She's doing this to get attention. And actually, a lot of the time, it's not. Like when I said about my mum and that, I remember sometimes I'd ring in hospital because I used to struggle sitting down, things like sitting down. I'd be sitting, wiggling my legs, like I couldn't even sit still. I'd be standing in the corner because the voice would be like, if you sit down, you're burning less. If you stand in the corner, you're burning more. And the nurses would have to literally physically force me to sit down. And then I'd be in tears on the phone to my mum because I'd be like, Mum, are you okay? Are you okay? And people think that it's just all you're thinking of is yourself. But actually, a lot of the time, what happens is the voice that's in my head. When I say the voice, it is me. It's like a very negative version of Emma. A lot of the time, it's all down to the individual, but it hits home. It says things to you that hurts the most, and it always pick up on things. What it says to you, what will happen, or like fat is one of my worst fears because then that would flash back to the bullies. My mum, because I had a very close relationship with my family, it will always hit deep into the areas that it's going to make you not do it, because actually the voice is the weaker part of you. I think back then I used to always think that voice was the strong part of me. It was the control. It controlled me. It made me powerful. It made me, it stopped the bullies because I got skinny. But actually it's the weaker part. And as soon as I started to say no, started to try and fight back, you find that actually it gets quieter because actually it is quite weak. But at the time you think it's your most powerful tool. And that was the hardest thing for me to kind of come to terms with.
I think it's great you shared that because I don't hear about it a lot, but, I can relate. People used to say I'm paranoid. I'm not paranoid. Like, it's my thoughts, Still have them today. I still really struggle with that today. I don't think it's just related to food. I think it's mental health. And that is sometimes why the reason I use drugs as well, but particularly around food. I've heard a lot of people I've shared with recently. I've got back on the boat with my eating disorder, and I'm going to therapy and group therapy sessions with it, and that's coming up more and more. If you do this, that's going to be the consequence because it doesn't want me to eat. It doesn't want me to be well. So it will feed me into my insecurities because your body knows your insecurities because it's you. So it will feed you, and it's not one voice saying one thing. It doesn't always go to you look fat. It will go to, do you remember when someone laughed at you for eating 3 dinners? Your mum's going to pass away. Your wife don't like you. You're rubbish in bed.
Yeah.
All those things. And it's normally when my relationship's struggling, so it'll use the sex line. I've had a row with my mum last week, so it'll drop in my mum, you know. That's what happens with my head. You know, it feeds in, it knows, you know. I think what I would like to know is, you know, you've got a long time in recovery that is absolutely phenomenal. I think eating disorders is particularly tough and not spoken about enough, really. You know, I'll share this. You know, recently I said to someone, so I'm going back through therapy with eating disorders. If I don't pick up a drug or drink today, I know I'm going to be sober and clean. Fundamentally, no matter what, just don't pick up. No matter how tough today gets, but I've got to eat food. I cannot get through today without eating food. And that's the hard bit I find, because I can't just bottom line it. So I'm interested to know, like, what's the stuff you do to keep you well? So for our listeners out there that may be suffering, maybe even just thinking they've got an eating disorder, or people on the other side of the fence, like friends, loved ones, family, what do you do on a daily basis?
One thing I don't do, and I'm always adamant with this, even with when my husband does certain things, is I don't do diets. I don't trust myself around diets. Even if I did put weight on, I will never go down the dieting route, because I know I've got that addictive tendencies. And I always say, if I go down, try and do a diet thing, I don't know if I will spiral into that obsessive tendencies again. I don't like these fad diets. I'm a personal trainer. I train a lot of people. I don't get them to step on scales. So I don't like the scales. I call it the sad step. That's what I call it, the sad step. I will do measurements instead, just because I joined David Lloyd's, and they've got a machine that breaks down all your muscle, fat, water, everything. And I went on this, and I was with my husband at the time, so it was only about 4 years ago, and I started going on it, and I was going constant every session, and Tom was like, why are you going on it every time you go to date? Which I could go like 3-4 times a week, to you know, if I'm doing my splits, like leg day, upper body day. And Tom's like, why are you on it again? And I'm like, I don't know, it's just, I need to know. I need to. So that's one thing. I don't do. If you've had an eating disorder or know someone with an eating disorder, I stay away from scales. I don't trust myself around diets. Even if I thought, I could try it, I won't do it, because I know that I've already got that addictive tendencies around food. I've finally found a healthy relationship with exercise. So I find that exercise sometimes is a bit of my outlet. Owning your own business, you know, it's very stressful. So I sometimes, if I know my stress is getting too much, I will go do a workout, because I find that's like a healthy kick of, like, with the endorphins. Obviously, if you are severely underweight or that you can't do exercise, I'll always say go to a specialist. With my personal training, I train a lot of people that are in recovery of eating disorders, or they have body image issues, body dysmorphia, and they come to me because, one, I understand it. Two, I don't let them. If I always think of it from my saying, if I said, right, Emma, you got to do, back like 15 years ago, you got to do 30 seconds of squats, I would be going to town on these squats. Like, I'll be going like 100 miles an hour to get as many reps in. So when I have my clients that have had eating disorders, I say, you're going to stop at 12 reps, because then in their head, they've got a number they're working towards, and then they have to stop. That's giving them the permission they need to stop. Whereas if I said, Ben, you got to do 30 seconds of squats, and you had an eating disorder, you would be, I know what I would do. I'd be like, let's go. So that's one of the other big things that I do. But I think the biggest thing that I found was talking to people about it. I open up about my story a lot, because I think if I had someone like me 20 years ago, when I first was going through, like when I first went into the Phoenix Centre, I think maybe I wouldn't have battled over 8 years, like nearly 10 years of it, because the amount of doctors that come, the amount of therapists I had. I feel bad for the therapist. The amount of therapists I walked out on or slammed the door, you know, because they touched a subject that I didn't want to open up about, and I was like, I'm not talking to you about this. And I used to say to them, have you been through this? And they'll be like, no, but I got my piece of paper. I know I got my degree. And I'd be like, well, I don't want to speak to you. And the shutters come up. And I think if I spoke to someone that had an eating disorder, so say if I was sitting with me 20 years ago, I think that would have given me the hope to recover, because sometimes all people need is the hope. People, you say, Emma, that light at the end of the tunnel's coming. And I was like, that light at the end of the tunnel feels about 2 miles away. I don't think I've got the energy to get there. And two, I don't even know if I believe you that there's that light.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes just speaking to someone that's been through the other side, and I think you trust them. I think I have a lot of clients that come to me, parents that have been on waiting lists, and they come to me, and I kind of give a different approach for eating disorder recovery, and they're like, my child has opened up to you more in the month than they have with their therapist for 6 months, because it's like their eyes open up and they're like, you get me. You actually understand what I'm going through.
It's not only the experience, though, it's the language, isn't it, I think? Because like you said earlier on about Emma's going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
In your head, that's an obstacle then. That's a wall. I can't get past it. Oh, it's going to be worse when you get into the adult bit. Oh, I'm going to be there then. Rather than somebody like you, if you'd been sitting there saying, hey, look at me. I did this. You can too. What a different message. And, you know, the other people, they might not exactly the same with regards to a process to something. If they've not been through it and they can't genuinely give that hope and empathy, it's not the same, is it? It's not powerful in the same way.
I think it's so important. Like, you know, I've done more work in my 4 weeks because of that than I ever have. Now, I was seeing classed as the top end specialist on eating disorders in the UK for the last 18 months before this. I had 2 relapses, not blaming him for the relapses, but exactly that. I hadn't been through it. Had all the qualifications, knew the right questions to ask. Ben ain't opening up to him. And he tried, bless him, over and over again. Tried. I've spent 4 weeks with my new thing. They've been through it. They get it. They know the language. They know when I'm talking about I'm shit in bed, it ain't about that. You know, and I've opened up to them. I felt some release as well. Like, I feel like I've been a bit raw, and that's like good for me. That's development. So it's really important. You know, my message to anyone that's going through therapy is don't just select the first therapist. Or, you know, I used to go on Google, the best therapist for this, and find the one that's got the most letters after their name and done it for 25 years. This geezer must know what he's talking about. But, you know, I've now realised I went, you know, with this selection process, I see 4 therapists. And I picked them for all different things, and I went and had a coffee, and then I picked one that was suitable for me.
I had the best therapist, and I honestly think that he was the game changer. I used to call him Yoasty Toasty. That wasn't his actual name. His name was Yoast. If he's listening, you're amazing. And he got he got me for me. He knew when we were in a room, if I was feeling overwhelmed, it was he hit the right area, but it was too much sitting in the because like you get used to that clinical side, you know, sitting in those the amount of hospital rooms. And he'd say, right, Emma, let's get up, put your shoes on, we're going for a walk. And then suddenly I'd open up because I'm in, you know, I'm walking. He knew that kind of exercise helped me a lot of the time, but it was too much to be sitting in this small tiny room to open up about that very raw subject that he got right. It was the area we needed to speak about, but he knew when he was like, right, get your shoes on. And he just got me. He knew when he could push me harder. He knew days where he was like, okay, Emma's, you know, she's having a bit of a hard day. You know, it's a hard day today. When to do. And he was absolutely amazing. And he actually pushed past, because when you get to 18, unfortunately, you have to go on to adult services. Sometimes the transition to adult services, you get lost. A lot of people get lost in that kind of transition period. But he actually stayed on past that just to help me, so I didn't have to go see someone else. And he was amazing.
I think it's the trust as well. Certainly for addicts or people with mental disorders, and I use that terminology, so I probably just don't use that terminology, but that trust I don't get. But when I do, I open up more than anything that I've opened up in my life. But it only happens with a select amount of people.
Well, it's like your biggest, darkest secret. It's mine. This is my secret, and I'm not just suddenly going to open it up to everyone that comes in. You know, every doctor saying, "Hi, I'm Emma. I've got an anorexia. This is how it happened." You're not going to be like that, because otherwise you're speaking to about 20 different people all the time. And it is what you said. Like, sometimes it's building that rapport. I think that's the biggest thing you need to do. I do that with a lot of my clients, is building that rapport. And then suddenly when you build that rapport, they just open up, and it's like, you know, you said it feels like a weight off your shoulders, because sometimes I felt there was like, Emma was inside screaming, like, I want to tell them, I want to let people in, I want to get better, I don't want to feel this pain anymore. But it took a lot for someone to get in there to let that little Emma out, to be like, I need help.
That person's got to allow you to do it. And like some people, without meaning to, put a barrier up, don't they? They've got to understand people first of all, but then the kind of person you are, and they've got to be able to flex. And actually, if they can't flex how they do things, like the one I can't remember the name that you gave there.
Yoasty Toasty, Yoast.
That's the one. Recognise, get up and go for a walk. It's not a hard thing to do. But if you don't recognise that, and actually you're not comfortable in doing that, you're not going to get the best out of people. So it's important, I think, to be able to flex. Or if you can't, recognise it and say, do you know what, I think this person would be good for you because they might take this approach. And the other thing is, we talk about like a therapist and stuff here. Sometimes it isn't about a therapist, is it? It's about a therapist and a peer supporter, or a therapist and a friend who's been through this kind of stuff. And I think that's really another important thing to talk about. Everybody is different and therefore needs to approach things in a different way as well. And it's all right to say that, isn't it? Like, I'm happy to see you. I also want to see someone else as well.
Yeah, what I experience is I'll be screaming inside, like you've said, and I want to tell, and I could feel it getting there, and it'll stop there, just before it come out, and I get more frustrated. Then I beat myself up. Then my mental health and my eating disorders on me, because it says you're an idiot. Why aren't you saying this? You know, and it just goes round and round, more and more. It's screaming. That screams more because I want to say it. I can't get it out, and I spent 3 weeks recently getting something to there, and finally it come out last week, and I see it in his eyes. Actually, he'd been waiting for that for 3 weeks, but also, like you mentioned, he hasn't pushed. It was when it was going to come in my time. He hasn't gone away from the subject, but he's just tactfully changed things. You know, he threw me a Game Boy. I ain't played one of them for 10 years this week.
Oh, I love Game Boys.
And then all of a sudden, like, I opened up. Do you know what I mean? I felt more relaxed. I think what I like to tap into, so I followed you on LinkedIn and some other stuff. I think this is really important for people in recovery. You know, your life seems great. You're doing some great stuff with your work. And, you know, I like people to share that stuff because I was a down and out using addict. Everyone told me I was never going to be anything in life. Like many of us do, there's a lot of stigma attached to mental health, eating disorders, addiction. So do you want to share sort of the things you're doing today and where you are?
Yeah, I think I get the question. What I'll start with is people say, would you change what you went through? And I always say no. I changed the pain it caused my mum, my dad, and my brother especially, because he's going through a lot now, because he witnessed things at 10 that he probably shouldn't have done at 10. I would change the pain it caused them, but it shaped me into the woman I am today, because it's given me the opportunities I'm allowed. So one, I kind of stuck 2 fingers up at the people that said you can't have a healthy relationship with food or exercise, because I'm a personal trainer, I'm a nutritionist, I'm a pre and postnatal specialist. But one of my biggest achievements was when I went into doing the more lived experience, the mental health ambassador scheme with Health Watch. Amazing. And I go round and I tell my story. I'm really open with my story, because I always think if I can help one person, you know, I can sleep well tonight. And I'm now going around being a big advocate for the people that sometimes that don't feel they got a voice. Maybe they haven't got a voice, or they feel that they can't be heard because they're too scared to be able to open up. And we're having big meetings in front of the NHS. Some of the big names in the NHS, some of the I went to the House of Commons Tuesday or Wednesday. So we're doing a lot of things to try and change the policies and procedures around eating disorders and mental health, because I'll be honest, they haven't really changed in 20 years. And they're still very similar, especially with the eating disorder side. They're kind of set in their ways. And actually what we're trying to do is be an advocate, because what I don't want is someone to have to go through what I went through for over 10 years, because you shouldn't have to suffer for 10 years, be that revolving door, have that negative comments that I used to get. And we're really trying to make change, and that's one of the biggest things I'm proud about, is that I'm getting the opportunities to tell my story, to change the procedures and how they do it, and just helping. I always think I want to look back at that Emma when she was 10 or 12, like absolutely petrified, felt she was in control, but she's not. And I feel like I'm helping them. I help parents come to me. I help children that have got eating disorders at the moment. I train people with body, because I don't like working in generic gyms. I always said I didn't want to work in a generic gym, just because not everyone feels comfortable in a generic gym. If you've got body dysmorphia, body image issues, you're not going to want to go into that generic gym, especially like the big weight section. So I help people in that aspect. And I just love spreading the word that it's okay to not be okay. I think that's the biggest thing we need to say, and opening up. And I'm also doing a lot of things around opening up about eating disorders that men get it too, because there's so many taboos out there that men can't get eating disorders. It's a girl's illness, which isn't true. So we're trying to make a lot of change out there.
I was told, about, bulimia particularly. They say I was a woman's illness. I was told that, overeating's a man's, but the purging side of it's not. So I get that. It's just you're doing so much. It's so refreshing to see. I don't see enough about eating disorder. Certainly for male. We mentioned this earlier, but certainly for male, I don't see enough in the public domain. And it all goes into the same thing. Why we're doing the podcast is around the mental health stuff. It's a. I can act out on food the same way I can act out on drugs. But that is the truth for me.
I think eating disorders, it's an addiction. Let's be honest. It's a type of addiction, isn't it? It's a type of self-harm, because you're harming your body in a different way. Yes, you're not, physically causing harm, but you are internally. And I think eating disorders are very complex. I think people think it's just you don't eat, or you eat and you purge, or all that. It's actually really quite complex. And normally eating disorders come with so many other mental health conditions as well. I had OCD, I had anxiety, I had depression. That's why a lot of hospitals didn't always like me, because I fitted in so many boxes. And sometimes that's why they can't cope with some people, because like for you, Ben, like you had you had your eating disorder, but you had other things along with it. Sometimes they don't know how to deal with people that are not in just one box.
Yeah, I mean, I arrived at hospital once, and I was being treated by 3 different teams, and they all the treatment plans all contradicted each other, because there weren't one team that could sort out the 3 illnesses, right? So I remember looking at it, and eventually a specialist said, well, we can't do that because you're telling him to do that. And that's what happened. The cycle for a long time. I turned up to hospital on an overdose. So I needed fundamentally to be treated for drug addiction. But I had a raging out eating disorder that was clear and evident, right? I got COPD in my lungs, right? That needs to be treated another way. And at one point they were telling me they can't give me the drugs for the COPD because I'm a drug addict. But the guy's going, if you don't get that, he's going to die. The other person's saying, well, if you don't eat sensibly, he's going to die. And the other guy's, well, you can't take drugs or alcohol anymore. So what did I do? I just went out the door. And killed myself in another 3 years.
A lot. I had that. I remember there was a few things that I had. One was in hospital. They wanted to move me to another hospital because they said, Emma, it's too complicated. She's not fit in our program. They had to actually get it's funny now, but it's not funny back then. They had to actually get like bank staff in. They had to get more staff on the hospital ward because I was an absolute nightmare. But my dad actually was a big advocate for me. I was like, why are you moving my daughter on? She's been, not fit in the program. But what you need to do is now learn that not everyone's going to come through this hospital door like everyone else. This is my daughter. She's not fit in the program. What are you going to do about your program to be able to have people like that? Because she needs to be here, but you don't want to move your program for her. And the other one was I went to the doctors, my mum. Because when you're a teenager, your parents have got a lot more say. When you're an adult, obviously you're an adult, and they said, if Emma, drink this pint of water and then you can leave. You haven't got an eating disorder. So guess what I did? Down the thing and out I went. And my mum was like, "Are you being serious?" And the amount of times I walked out.
I had a log, so I went down to GP and I used to have to log my food. I logged what I ate, and what was on that log were just not correct. Yeah, I went there so I had to take it every week. Right, this was with my mum, and he went, "Oh yeah, he's all right." I was like, I remember me being a naughty. I think we got a little devil streak in us. Yeah, I got off on that. I beat the system. You become
a compulsive liar. I'll be honest. If you believe what I was saying back then when I was really poorly, you need to recheck it, because I was saying what I needed to say to get out the door.
Yeah. I think it's really key that me and you, or you today, but like that's shared about, because I always say whenever I've gone into these places, don't take the first, second, third thing I say. Maybe the fourth might be getting somewhere near the truth. Certainly around feelings. certainly around what I'm eating. You know, eating in particular for me, I'm very secretive about. I always have been. You know, one of the things for me is if I'm in public, you know, I will never binge in public. I will leave food because I think I'm in control. People won't notice. I'll go home and eat 10 Ripples, 5 Red Bulls, pack of this, pack of that, whatever I can get my hands on, right? I'll never tell you the truth, ever.
No.
This therapist is the first time that I've got there, and it's taken me 10 years to really open up about that stuff. I'm now doing a tracker through an app that I have to scan the back of the stuff with, you know. So for me, that works, right?
You have to find what works for the individual. I think that's the most important thing, because my mum was like, Emma, you're lying to my face. You're doing it whilst I'm standing here. Parents, when I have some of my clients, they're like, don't take what she says as gospel. And I said, oh, don't worry, I won't. I was there. You know, I take it what they say as a pinch of salt. And I think the important message is that we have to you have to have that individualized plan. You need to find what works for the individual. What worked for me wouldn't work for you. Wouldn't work, you know, for everyone. Everyone is different. I think that's the biggest thing that's what we're trying to change with the policies and procedures. Is it's not working because they're trying to have that generic plan where no one person's the same, and what someone comes in with, say, anorexia nervosa, would not be exactly the same as when I came in with anorexia nervosa, because we're two completely different people.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's like you've got that, so you must be treated like this. And that's the only way that works. And that doesn't. And life's evolved since a lot of these policies were in place anyway. We've got different foods now. Yeah? Our brains are different.
Social media.
Social media's different.
That's the one. I'm glad that social media wasn't a big thing when I was... Because social media is, I find... And with COVID as well, they found... That's why I was at the House of Commons, because we're talking about the effect of COVID for children with who's got mental health, with the mental health, because it's so different, and it's very hard having an eating disorder these days, because one, you don't get away from it. If I was bullied, at least I got to go home. Yeah. And now social media is, let's be honest, it's rife. It's just it feeds a lot of the control that I spoke about earlier. Social media almost feeds that, because it's also sometimes a lie. Like, you have to take it as a pinch of salt as well.
I think one of the things I do want to tap into, you mentioned about diets. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because I also can't diet, because I take it extreme. Like, can you share a little bit about maybe when you have dieted, or why you don't diet in a bit more detail?
So why I don't diet is because it's very it's in a very controlled manner. It's very ritual based. It's very number based. Okay, so when you have an eating disorder, you're very good with numbers, okay? Back then, I could tell you what was on a Tesco, how many calories was in a Tesco Rivita and Asda Rivitas. Numbers is very compulsive for me. I'm very addictive with numbers. And I find that we spoke about that kind of, that endorphins, you know, that high. And I find that when I become very rigid with what I'm eating, then I feel like I fall back into old patterns. But also, I talk about a lot, I have a lot of flashbacks, so I can have flashbacks of when I was poorly, and diets just don't work for me. It's because of the numbers, it's because it's quite rigid, and I just fall back into old patterns. I feel like a lot of people say this, and I said, it's right. My eating disorder is right in the back of my head, and I lock it away with lots and locks of keys. However, diets, the numbers, the rigidness, it starts to unlock some of those locks in the back of my head, and I don't trust myself around it. That's kind of what my plain saying. I have to have quite a wide range in my diet of what I eat, because if I become fixated, I can become very fixated on things, and that's the same with diets as well. I'm not saying diets are bad. It's bad if you've had an eating disorder. That's what I personally think. It works for some people, but it just doesn't work for me, because I fall back into that control that I spoke about. The numbers, I get the flashbacks, and then that addictive tendencies just start creeping in. I guess it's like, someone said it the other day, and it was really interesting what they said. They said, can I ask you a question? And I was like, yeah, it was a client. And she said, is an eating disorder recovery, is there such thing as recovery? Is it like an alcoholic? They go to AA. is it the same that if you get a little sip of it, then you start to fall back into old ways? You know, sometimes if you're an alcoholic, you can't have any alcohol because you have that first taste. Then, you know, one turns to two, turns to that. And I think that's the same with eating disorders around diets for me.
That makes a lot of sense.
I've just gone to exactly the same process. So it's interesting you mentioned a lot. So saying that I've gone is exactly that. There's things off the table for Ben. I can't touch them. It's as simple as that. Now I've got to eat, and it's about what I can eat. But I also don't want to be on a diet. So what we've done is we've taken the musts. These are off the table, mainly around chocolate and certain takeaways. I cannot have them because what it does, it leaves that jar open. Not today, not next week, but there'll be a point when that will turn into 5 chocolate bars or whatever, and I'm back in that mindset. So I get it. I really do get it. And I've never been there in my eating disorder recovery for a point of stubbornness and control. I'm going to control this. I can eat that. It's all right. I can do that. I haven't touched that for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And now what I've just done is gone to that. So I've got 12-step fellowship, and we're using that similar model. But I'm also trying to expand my foods that you just mentioned. I think that's really important as well. Otherwise, I can eat breakfast, lunch, dinner the same. Because I know there's 1,815 calories in that.
I try and, if something scares me, like sometimes, like I said, I can have sometimes disordered eating, I'd call it. I can have fears. If I know that, I do this with my clients. I have like, some of my clients have a fear food jar. So foods they loved, but they're scared of, especially if they've got anorexia. So things like chocolate or a takeaway. I say we're going to have that because you have to feel the fear and do it anyway, because that's how you get that control back. And same with me, if something scares me, sometimes I do it because I know that that's needed for me to move forward. And yeah, that's why I and that's the same thing with that David Lloyd thing. When I said I kept step on scales, I don't have scales in my house. I can't step on scales because, especially ones that break it down into muscle, fat, water, especially for us women, time of the month, our fat percentage is higher anyway because of the hormones. But I won't step on them because that's why I call it the sad step, because then my brain starts ticking again. So I stay away from that.
I love that term, the sad step. I love, that is, I get that so much. You know, like I don't really, I did for a while use scales, and the ones that you mentioned. My son said to me yesterday, "Oh, how much do you weigh?" I said, "I don't know, I don't care, because that's not what's important for me right now. Am I happy? Yes. Am I eating good food, healthy food that I'm happy with? Yes. Okay, I'm good with that." Diets, right? I'm the same with diets. Actually, you know, when I said I found out about the binging stuff and I hadn't recognised it, what I'd done was I'd been waiting for a thing at work where they were, for occupational health, they were going to do like this opportunity to lose weight, but you had to fast and stuff. When I went through my history and that, they said, "Oh, you can't do this because of your binge eating." It was that was the point I recognised it. I was like, whoa. I looked back at a bunch of diets I'd done in the past as well, saying like Slimmer's World and all that. Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers is an interesting one because it was when I was drinking. And if you think about I used to call it the chocolate biscuit diet as well, because how many biscuits could I eat for the points? I got so many points, but I'd be like, well, how many beers can I have? Oh, okay, well, I can drink whiskey and I get more whiskey than beer because of the points. So that's how I was doing it. And I was making sure I used up the points based upon whiskey consumption, which isn't healthy.
No.
But I looked like I was okay because I was losing weight. And so I can really recognise it. I also steer away from that kind of stuff because
but it's also sometimes people are like, "Oh, you know, Chris, you're looking amazing, you're losing weight." But sometimes that's like, "Oh yeah, I've got to keep going." But for someone like me, my number, I'd be like, "I'm going to get down to this weight. I'm going to get to 9 stone, then I'll be happy." I got to 9 stone. Okay, I'm going to lose a little bit more. That number that we wanted to get to would be like, you can't survive on that. But also sometimes the wording you see on the diets. This is another thing why I won't do it. Is it Weight Watchers? They call it you got sins.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like some of the terminology. My mum, I laugh now. She used to, her and her friend used to be on Weight Watchers, and they save up their points if they knew we were going out, you know, have some wine and that, because then they got to save up their points so they could go out and it went over their whatever they were allowed. And it's just it's the wording. Yeah.
My eating disorder's been the worst in my life when I've looked the best.
Yeah,
that's the truth.
Don't you look back sometimes? When I look back and think, I used to think I was fat then. I looked amazing, and I still think I looked fat.
So people have commented like I've lost a bit of weight. I look good, my skin looks good, and it's been when I'm at my worst. I've been screaming inside. I've been binging and purging. But because we're told or we're perceived in the world through social media now that we must look a certain way to be attractive or whatever, and obviously I've got that stuff anyway, because I've started to look a little bit better, people assume that I'm naturally better. And that's the problem with an eating disorder. We was discussing this last night. With drugs and drink, most people can see when I'm drunk or high. Like, it's very evident. Like, you know, I'm all over the place, I'm falling, I'm wetting myself, whatever. With food, I can get away with it for a long time.
And that's like my gambling, isn't it? It's so
see it.
similar. Actually, you talk about numbers as well, and like I need to hit this way or whatever. It's the same with gambling, isn't it? Oh, once I win this much, I'll withdraw. So the mental stuff that's going on is very, very similar.
Well,
Okay, we're doing something
it's
different.
it's a type of they're all addictive tendencies. They're all a type of addiction, and I find that there's a thing that I'm trying to stem away from. So there's a social media where it says what I eat in a day at 24 weeks pregnant, and there people list of all the foods they're eating at the moment, and I look at them thinking, I eat so much more than that. You know, then like my brain starts ticking over, and I think sometimes you're more susceptible to comments. I think it's the comment side. One, I loved it when I started losing weight because people were like, you look so good, you look so skinny. Then you take it too far and they're like, oh, they used to say you look dug up. You know, some of the things they used to say to me, and now people make comment, and I think, and my husband will be like, why are you so worried about what people think and the comments? Why do you take it to heart? He don't care. He's so laid back he'd fall over anyway. But I'm like, I don't know, but comments, he's like, they're just words. And I said, words hurt more.
We're hypersensitive. We discussed that earlier.
We did, yeah.
I suffer, my disease is more, and I'm hypersensitive to feelings and emotions. I feel it more than anyone else. So when someone says your work's rubbish, I'm scared suicidal sometimes. That's the truth for me. I think that's mental health overall. When someone says you don't look nice, they're calling me fat.
And Tom's like, and he also says, you know, like someone says a whole list of stuff to you. He said you've picked out that one negative word.
Yep.
They've told you so many amazing things, but that one little negative comment, you've literally clung on to it.
They're not even there, are they? Those positive things.
No.
You don't even see them. They
I don't even
exist.
see it. And I guess you become I'm very much a perfectionist. I don't in the business world. It has its perks because you do well. However, the stress and that it causes you is unbelievable. I think sometimes people forget. On the outside, I look such a happy, smiley person. I think you're very good at putting on a front. But if they were inside my head can sometimes be absolute chaos.
Yeah. Oh, we both understand this, don't we, mate?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like the perfectionism is a tough one. You know, we discussed this as well, haven't we? Like, you know, it's our driver. It's our more. It drives results. It also drives you crazy and everyone else around you. And it's trying to find that balance that I'm getting and Chris is getting, and it's finding that balance between the two. I think is so key. When's enough for Ben? That's what I'm trying to do today. When am I at it? You know, and it's hard. So Emma, obviously you've been around a while and you've started your own business. Just as we near the end of the podcast, I just want to ask: is there any organisations or charities that you can recommend or you've used in the past to our listeners?
Yeah, so I've used Beat, so I work closely with Beat. So Beat's a good one. They're one of the leading organisations for eating disorders. The only issue sometimes is because they're waiting lists, because there is such a long waiting list for that. There's someone in Suffolk called the White House, so they're for people that, like me, years ago got told of a bit of a revolving door. They never turn away anyone that they think is untreatable. There's obviously Health Watch Essex, who we're with the Mental Health Ambassador Scheme. So that's a really good one because a lot of the people there's individual ones for lived experience. So we've all got individual stories of what we, in areas that we've recovered from. I do eating disorder support as well. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that,
Yes,
but I
you
do.
are.
Yes, I am. So my business, Muscle My Wellness, we support people that, not on a medical side, so we can't do medical interventions, but we kind of signpost out with the Beat and that to help with people that are on the waiting list whilst they're waiting to transition into the more medical side of things. But yeah, that's what I can say. I think we should really, because with the Beat side and everything, they're amazing. But like I said, with the waiting list, sometimes if you really look into it in your local areas, there's a lot of smaller businesses that can help out. And that's what we're trying to do especially with Health Watch Essex, is trying to kind of transition so we can help with that limbo area that some people fall through. So with Muscle Mind Wellness, with Health Watch Essex, with the White House, we're trying to transition people to help support them whilst they're on the waiting list to see people like beating that.
Brilliant. Brill. Thank you,
yeah,
mate.
that's all right.
No, that was awesome. That's awesome. It's so important to share this information because, you know, people watch this, want to share this and don't know where to go. I've been in a place where I didn't know where to go for stuff. You have been, because I know this from us talking earlier. I'm going to share this. So Ben didn't know about NA. I really needed to go to NA for years, but thought about AA and thought, well, do you know what? Because of some of the drugs I've used, I won't be welcome in AA, so I won't go. If he'd known about NA, maybe he'd have got through the doors sooner. So that's why I want to share this stuff. So it's amazing. Thank you for doing that.
I think it's important, just as, like I said earlier, it's okay to not be okay. And I think the biggest step into get aid in recovery is, I know back then, was you need to recognise that there's something wrong. And that's the biggest step, is to say, actually, I think I've got a problem. And that's okay to say that. That's not saying you're going to be cured tomorrow, but that's the first step into opening up those doors to be able to say to someone, I'm not okay. And then I think we need these sort of discussions. This is why I wanted to come on today, because it's awesome, because we need these raw discussions that sometimes people kind of put those rose tinted glasses over, whereas actually sometimes all people need is a bit of hope, and actually, I'm not on my own. I'm not the only, I used to think I was weird. I'm not the only weirdo that does this, because no other children are like this. And actually to be like, oh, I actually get that. Sometimes you don't even realise you're doing stuff. And when you hear someone else say it, you're like, that's like, when you said with the binge eating, you're like, I didn't even realise I was doing that.
Yeah. No idea. I've been doing it for 30 years, 36 years or whatever.
I think it's like, I become more self-aware, more people, I'm around people that think like me, and I always thought I was weird too. And then I've been around a while now, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just normal, because actually he done that as well, That's my truth. That's what I've heard. One of the things when I come into recovery, they said, stick around long enough, you'll hear your story. I was like, no one's going to do what I've done. Well, I've heard mine and worse. That's reality. And I think it is important that we get hope out there. Because when I was in my madness and suicidal, I didn't have any hope. I wanted to die, and I think that is where most of us go. Like you said, you laughed at your dad, right, when he said that. Really and truthfully, that was your way of saying, I don't care if I die. Right? Yeah,
that people used to say it, and I'd be like, well, I don't need to worry about what I'll do next week, because hope. I was like, in my head, I was thinking, hopefully I'm not here tomorrow, because I can't be dealing with this pain anymore. Yeah. And it's sad to think that. And you want to give that person a hug sometimes. I think I was in such a dark place, and I say that a lot, I've been there, done that, worn the tip. You can't say anything or do anything that I probably haven't thought or done myself.
Totally. And I guess just to finish this off, the image I've got in my head right now is you today going back to your 10-year-old self, giving that 10-year-old self a massive hug, saying, I know you're in pain now, but one day it'll be okay and you're going to be making a difference to so many other people. So thank you so much for coming on today.
I really thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed being able to speak openly about it, so thank you.
Brilliant.
So thanks, Emma, for coming on. It's been a really good sort of session today. Got a lot of identification from you, so thank you very much. To all our listeners out there, please give us a follow on Instagram or Twitter. We'll have the links below, and look up episode 4. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
As we wrap up another amazing and inspiring episode of The Guiding Light, remember, although your journey is unique, you most certainly are not alone. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to explore, reach out please across our socials or via our website www.theguidinglight.co.uk. Until next time, take care of yourself.